I'm back with another book review. And this one is inspired from a review that I read on Chocolate Hair, Vanilla Care. She's one of the Facebook members on the Church My Daughter page. And I read a review that she did of this book on her page, and I liked her review, but I had a different thought, and I wanted to read the book for myself and see if my assumptions would be the same, if my impression would be the same after I read the book. And it kind of was. But here's the book. It's called Ella Kazoo Will Not Brush Her Hair. So let me talk a little bit about what this story is about. It's about a young girl who doesn't want to brush her hair, and she does all kinds of things to avoid brushing her hair. And I would imagine that a lot of time goes by with her not brushing her hair, because at the beginning of the story, she starts off with hair that is this short. But by the end of the story, her hair has grown extremely long and out of control. And as you can see throughout the story, her mother is really struggling with her to try to get her to brush her hair. You know, in fact, there's one scene where her mother is even having a tantrum in frustration because no matter what she does, her daughter won't brush her hair. And as time goes by, all kinds of things get trapped in her hair. And the resolution that they have at the end of the story is that they have to cut her hair to set it to rights. And she gives up and gives in and decides that she needs to get her hair cut. And it ends with her looking like this. And I guess the implication is that she's much happier now because she only has one little bit of piece of lock of hair left, and she'll know better now to keep it groomed so that she doesn't run into these type of problems again. So what I liked about the book, I loved the fact that I was seeing the image of someone, even though this is not an African American girl. It doesn't talk about her nationality, but I'm assuming she's white. Her parents appear to be white. They don't have curly hair like her. And her hair is very tightly curled, and I love how it's spread out and kind of standing. It almost reminds me of nappy hair. But this book is not, there's no implication that this is nappy hair. I mean, this is a white girl, and it's her mom that's complaining about grooming her hair. But I like that image. And when I read the book to my two daughters, MG2 and MG3, they both liked the fact that her hair was big and curly, and as her hair got longer, MG2 in particularly really liked watching her hair grow. I liked the spirit of this little girl. It talks about how as much as her mom is getting frustrated, she's happy, she's carefree, she's going about her life, enjoying life. It talks about her running and skipping through the rain and dancing in the sunshine with her hair. She won't be hindered by the grooming that's necessary to maintain her hair, because she doesn't take it so seriously, at least not as seriously as her mom does. And even when she's with other girls her age and they are disdaining her hair, probably because of all the things that are in it, she seems to be happy and carefree. It doesn't bother her one bit that she's the only one with hair like this. And I like that. I liked her spirit. She seemed carefree and happy. What I didn't like with her is I didn't like the way she dealt with her mom. Obviously, one of my daughters immediately said, "That's disrespectful." You know, mom is telling her over and over that she needs to do her hair, and she doesn't want to listen. I understand where the author was probably going with this when she probably wants to, send out the message that it's important to keep yourself well groomed. But what I didn't like about this is the minute I saw her hair and I heard the title, I said to myself, Ella Kazoo will not brush her hair. I said I don't blame her. I don't blame her. She probably doesn't want to brush her hair because it hurts, and a brush is probably the very last thing I would want to put in hair that's this tightly coiled. At least not the type of brush that they were using. In fact, my daughter MG2 said, I think she should brush her hair with the Tangle Teaser. So that was a plug for the Tangle Teaser, but not a traditional conventional brush. I didn't one thing I didn't like another thing I didn't like was all the consequences of not brushing her hair. I think I would have been more on board if she refused to wash her hair. I could see that being more disgusting than refusing to brush her hair, and then having all sorts of things get caught in the hair. My daughters were kind of confused by, why is there a shirt in her hair? Why is there a fork in her hair? That doesn't happen to my hair. And this the concept that her hair, the more her hair grew and everything got all up in it, seeing as how I'm growing locks myself and detangling is no longer part of my routine, I don't know about a book that talks about all sorts of things being trapped in your hair. I know that with locks, there's often the perception that they're dirty and that they're smelly. But I don't think there's been a time in my life when I've washed my hair more frequently than I'm able to wash it now. So I wasn't impressed with that part. But the part that was tragic to me, the part that I didn't enjoy, was how they chopped all her hair off. And instead of maybe going back, I don't think I would have minded so much if they had gone back to the length that her hair was in the beginning, to kind of give her a starting place that kind of still had something. But to shave her head off and leave her with this almost straight little bit of hair, it seemed like a tragedy to me. So we talked about that, and my daughter said, oh, I liked it better when her hair was full of stuff. And I agreed. I agreed with her. I think this image was almost worse than the extreme image where everything was left in her hair and it was so long and out of control and unmanageable. So that was my thought about the book. I do recommend this being a book that you share with your daughters. I thought it was great for conversation. I thought we had discussions about talking about the misconceptions that people have about curly hair, and the things that people want to do with curly hair that make it difficult and unappealing to have curly hair. Another thing that bothered me about this story was some of the descriptive terms that were used to describe her hair that got progressively negative. But in my experience, some of these terms are attributes of this type of hair. And I'm not sure that it's negative. It should necessarily be negative. I mean, at the beginning of the story, it says Ella Kazoo will not brush her hair. But then it progresses to Ella Kazoo will not brush her mop. And then it talks about Ella Kazoo will not brush her frizz. Tangled hair just becomes more and more and more something that becomes overwhelming, until this very spirit that she starts off with of liking her hair and accepting the fact that it's out of control and not feeling a need to detangle it is lost, and it feels as though she just gives up and says, I don't want this hair. I don't want this hair anymore. It's just too much. It's out of control. And then when she goes to the hairdresser, she says, give me hair I won't have to untangle, hair that won't wander, and hair that won't strangle. And at that point in the story, the hair is actually strangling her, and it becomes something that she's at odds with, when in the beginning of the story, she seemed to be so at peace with her hair. So to me, I don't know if that's making mountains out of molehills for people, but to me, the message wasn't didn't wasn't victorious for me to me. You know, it seemed like the hair defeated her and crushed her spirit and brought her to a place where she was like, take it away from me, you know. But the problem is that she ended up cutting her hair down to this, but it will be back. And then what? Will it be continue to be a constant struggle? I think I would have liked it better if they had cut her hair back down to here and maybe brought it to a place where, you know, she was back at the starting point, and this time she was going to take the time to detangle her hair and not let it get overwhelming for her again, but not completely abandoning what her hair is to this. So, but I like this book, and I am glad I read it to my daughters, and I think because I think it's a good book to introduce some of these thoughts and some of these ideas and some of these issues to our girls with. You know, much easier to do it like this than to come up out of the blue and start talking about, you know, a deep issue, and your daughter is looking at you like, where'd that come from? But I think this book is a good way to segue into a discussion about some of these issues. So I think it's a good read. I think it's worth it. This is Ella Kazoo Will Not Brush Her Hair by Lee Fox. Tell me what you think down below. Be blessed.